Imagine waking up tomorrow and realizing that people no longer think. They don't question. They don't doubt. They don't wrestle with ideas. They simply echo what was handed to them, as though repetition were wisdom and borrowed phrases were evidence of understanding. Their words are no longer born from reflection, but manufactured elsewhere, packaged neatly and delivered into their mouths. The world has become so drenched in noise, so enslaved to speed and instant reaction, that the human mind once, the sharpest weapon ever forged, has been dulled into compliance. You can see it in conversations that never reach beneath the surface, where every sentence feels scripted, as though people are reading lines from a play they didn't even know they were cast in. Opinions arrive ready-made, pre-assembled, like meals from a factory line cheap fuel for the intellect, bland and forgettable, but consumed without hesitation. Outrage has become the new entertainment, a drug stronger than reflection, while certainty has become the substitute for courage, protecting people from the discomfort of doubt. And the crowd loves it. They chant together in perfect rhythm, 1,000 voices blending into one monotonous echo, until the solitary voice, the voice that dares to ask, why, is drowned and forgotten. This is not mere stupidity, not some natural absence of intelligence. No, it is something infinitely more dangerous, the conscious abandonment of thought, a mass decision to hand over the burden of reflection in exchange for the luxury of belonging. It is a hypnosis willingly entered into, a sleep that feels safer than the pain of waking. People don't want to examine the world. They want to be reassured by it. They cling to slogans like lullabies, to tribal chants like shields, to shared illusions like oxygen. But why? Because thinking is exhausting. Thinking burns energy. Thinking cracks the fragile shells of the illusions we build around ourselves to feel secure. To question is to risk exile from the group. To doubt is to shake the fragile scaffolding that holds up our sense of identity. Thinking pulls us into solitude, and most would rather drown in noise than endure silence. That is why society rewards the opposite. It elevates speed over depth, certainty over curiosity, confidence over substance. The entire system feeds on this obedience. The marketplace thrives on it, offering identity in the form of brands and belonging in the form of products. Politicians depend on it, spinning narratives so simple that no one dares to peel them apart. Media survives because of it, pumping out distraction after distraction, ensuring that no moment is left quiet enough for true thought to arise. And so the machinery of modern life works with perfect precision, not to sharpen your mind, but to blunt it, not to cultivate reason, but to weaponize emotion, not to create thinkers, but to mass-produce consumers. This is the great paradox of our time. Never have people had such access to knowledge, and yet never have they been so unwilling to use it. Do you see how clever it is? Information no longer arrives in streams. It crashes into us like relentless waves, torrents of data pouring in every second, faster than we can possibly absorb. And the overwhelmed brain, desperate to keep up, reaches for shortcuts. It does not analyze. It imitates. It does not examine. It follows. It copies patterns, borrows signals, and confuses noise for truth. A post stamped with 1,000 likes suddenly feels more real than a carefully reasoned argument that took months to craft. A trending opinion feels safer than a solitary doubt that burns quietly in the corner of one's mind. This is not reason speaking. It is herd instinct disguised as knowledge. And the more you adapt to this rhythm, the more you lose the very need to think. But thinking was never meant to be passive. Thinking is not just absorbing and storing information, it is wrestling with it. It demands patience, silence, solitude. It requires you to stop, to sit with the discomfort of uncertainty, to allow ideas to ferment instead of reacting instantly. These are the qualities modern life despises. Who now lingers with a book for hours, diving deep into a single train of thought without distraction? Who pauses after hearing something provocative, refusing to react until they've truly examined it? Even the wiring of our brains is shifting under the pressure. We skim instead of contemplate. We scroll instead of reflect. The soil where philosophy once flourished, the long hours of undisturbed reflection is drying up, cracked and barren. Carl Sagan once warned that we live in a civilization utterly dependent on science and technology, yet almost no one truly understands them. His fear was not just ignorance, but something worse, the loss of the very ability to recognize ignorance. And that is the true danger. When people stop thinking, they stop questioning. When they stop questioning, they become prey. Prey to manipulation, to propaganda, to fear. They no longer notice the invisible strings that guide their actions because they've surrendered the tools that would cut them. And it begins early. From the first classroom, the lesson is clear. Education is not built to awaken the mind. It is built to tame it. Children are rewarded not for originality but for conformity. The one who memorizes well is praised, while the one who doubts, resists, or disrupts is told to behave. Slowly, the message seeps in. Do not wander, do not challenge, follow the script. The result is not a generation of thinkers, but a population conditioned to consume thoughts instead of creating them. Schools become factories of obedience, not gardens of inquiry, stamping out the fire of curiosity before it can spread. John Taylor Gatto was right when he said that education does not cultivate philosophers, it manufactures servants. By the time we grow, the pattern is already set in stone. At work, in friendships, even in the endless theater of the internet, we quickly discover that raising difficult questions is dangerous. It marks you as strange, difficult, even threatening. Better to nod politely. Better to smile and blend in. Better to stay silent. And silence, practiced long enough, stops being a choice and hardens into a prison. Erich Fromm once said that many secretly flee from freedom because freedom does not come empty-handed. It drags with it the heavy chains of responsibility, and responsibility is a weight most are unwilling to carry. It is easier to bury yourself in groups than to endure the loneliness of individuality. Easier to surrender your voice to the tribe than to risk being singled out. Easier to let the collective do the thinking for you than to bear the isolation of independent thought. This is why true thinkers have always been rare and always hunted. To stand against the collective is to become a target. It is to invite mockery, ridicule, exile, sometimes even death. Socrates was forced to drink poison for corrupting the youth. Galileo was silenced for daring to move the earth out of its divine pedestal. Nietzsche was dismissed as insane for tearing away the comfortable masks of morality. Martin Luther King was murdered for refusing to accept the illusions of equality fed to the masses. History is filled with such figures, and their fates tell us something undeniable. To question the illusions of the age is to threaten the comfort of the age. And comfort never forgives disruption. Comfort kills the messenger before it listens to the message. Yet history also whispers another truth, one that cannot be erased. The world has never been transformed by those who kept silent. It is always the restless, the difficult, the unyielding who bend reality, those who valued truth above approval, those who preferred exile to conformity, those who chose to wrestle with ideas rather than drown in noise. They paid dearly for it, yes, but every crack in the old order was made by their refusal to bow. But here is the real question. How many today are willing to carry that burden? How many are willing to be misunderstood, condemned, abandoned for the sake of thought? Because make no mistake, you cannot truly think unless you are willing to think against yourself, against your habits, against your comforts, against the illusions you protect most fiercely. Jung was right. People will do almost anything to avoid confronting their own souls. We build entire industries of distraction, elaborate digital circuses, endless entertainment, all to keep from staring into the abyss within. Yet critical thought begins there and nowhere else. It begins with the courage to whisper to yourself, "What if I am wrong? What if the beliefs I defend are not mine but borrowed? What if the identity I cling to is nothing more than a mask I mistook for truth?" To ask these questions is to risk the collapse of everything familiar, but it is also the only way to build a life that is truly yours. And that is why critical thinking is more than an intellectual exercise, it is a spiritual rebellion. To think is to tear away the veil others are too afraid to touch. To doubt is to rip open the machinery of control and see its gears turning in the shadows. To reflect is to risk standing naked before reality, stripped of illusions, without the armor of comforting lies. And that is why most refuse. That is why most settle for the narcotic of distraction. It is easier to be comfortably numb than dangerously awake, easier to repeat than to wrestle, easier to belong than to stand alone. But if you reclaim your mind, if you dare to pull back what the world has draped over your eyes, everything shifts. You begin to notice how manipulation works. The subtle spells of language designed to steer you, the deliberate pull of emotions engineered to control you, the seductive promise of belonging offered in exchange for obedience. You begin to see that most of what passes for knowledge is theater, stage performances meant to pacify, not to enlighten. You stop being a consumer of ideas and become a seeker of truth. And in that shift, however small, something irreversible happens. You become untouchable. This is the fire carried by philosophers, mystics, rebels, visionaries. They were not simply louder voices in the crowd. They were deeper voices, voices that struck chords no noise could drown out. They understood what few dare to admit, that to think clearly is to live dangerously. For clarity threatens power, and power will always seek to silence what it cannot control. Yet they also knew something else, that to think is the only way to live freely. And so the choice comes to you, as it came to them: remain asleep in the safety of collective noise, or awaken to the dangerous, unrelenting freedom of thought. Every pause before you react, every question you dare to raise, every doubt you allow yourself to feel, that is not weakness. That is rebellion. That is resistance. The most radical act in our age is not to shout with the mob, not to echo what is already being screamed, not to trade your voice for approval. The most radical act is to think. Let the crowd trade freedom for validation. Let them drown in slogans. Let them dissolve into the glow of their screens. Let them mistake noise for meaning. But not you. If these words reach you, it means something in you has already begun to awaken. You are already different, and once awakened, there is no going back. You cannot unsee. You cannot unknow. You cannot unlearn. So stay awake. Stay questioning. Stay free. For in a world that fears thought, the act of thinking is nothing less than revolution